Hey everyone, Johnny here. In this video, I want to share with you 10 settings in Blender that can really help out your workflow. These are 10 that I usually set up on any new install of Blender, and I think you should check them out as well. Let's get into it. The first thing we're going to do in Blender is open up our preferences under Edit, Preferences. If you're not familiar with the Preferences screen, you're going to see a list of categories on the left-hand side, with a bunch of settings on the right-hand side for each category. The first setting I want to talk about is the resolution scale. If you find the text in the Blender interface too small, you can change the resolution scale to something more to your liking. For instance, if I change this to 1.25, all of my text is increased by 25%. If you find you're in a situation where you're presenting Blender to others on a big screen, sometimes it can help to increase the resolution scale. The next tip is the status bar settings. Under the Editors section, expand status bar. These are 4 checkboxes that you can use to add additional information to the bottom status bar of Blender. By default, it just shows the current Blender version, but you can also show things like how much video memory you have, how much system memory you have, and additionally, some statistics about your scene, including the current collection, how many vertices, faces, triangles, and objects you have. I find it's very helpful to have all 4 of these enabled all the time. Thirdly is translation. Now, by default, Blender is in English, but you can change that if you need to. By selecting the language dropdown, you can see all of the languages that are available to you. These are laid out in 3 categories: complete, in progress, and starting. Because Blender is an open source project, many people are working on the translation files. Hopefully your native language is available here. If your language isn't available, and you're bilingual and able to do some translation, the Blender team might need your help. The next setting I want to look at is the temporary editors, namely the render in setting. By default, Blender uses a new window to do its renders. Here, let me show you what I mean. In my scene, if I hit F12 to render, a new window is created, floating on top of my original window, and my render is done in that window. However, that's not the only option. If I go back to Preferences, I can change this to an image editor. Now if I render, it changes my current window to an image editor window and renders there. If I hit Escape, I return to my main window. The next option is a maximized area. Now if I do my render, the entire window that I'm over becomes a maximized window with my render in it. Hitting Escape will take me back. Finally is Keep User Interface. This is the setting that I usually choose when I do a render. What this means is, when I go to render, the screen doesn't change, and the render happens in the background. If I change to a tab that has an image editor and choose the render result, I can see my image. The 5th setting that I want to show is under the Editing subsection. In this Duplicate Data section, you'll see a list of options. These are the things that get duplicated whenever you duplicate an object. One item on this list that might be useful to you is Material. Let me show you what this means. By default, Material is not selected, so if I'm in my scene and I have an object, you see this one is assigned Material.001. If I press Shift-D to duplicate this object, and create a new one, you'll see that it is also assigned Material.001, and that the user count for Material.001 has gone up to 2. That means that 2 objects are using this same material. If I were to change this material, it would affect both objects. Now back in my settings, if I choose to include material in duplicate data, and go back into my scene, if I duplicate this object, you'll see that this object now has Material.002 assigned to it. These 2 still have Material.001. So now whenever I duplicate an object, its materials will be copied into a new material, separate from the original one. So now if I were to change this object's material, it would not affect these other 2, but these other 2 are still linked. If I want to go back so that duplicated objects have a linked material instead of a duplicated material, I would just uncheck Material. The 6th option that I want to show you is under Input. This is an option that I've just recently found, and had been one of my big complaints. It turns out you could change this setting. It's called Default to Advanced Numeric Input. The name is a little cryptic, but it does allow us to do something really nice. Let me show you. By default in Blender, Whenever you type a value into a box, say the x dimension of this object, not only can you type in a number directly, you can also type in a mathematical formula, like 1 plus 2 times 7. And I get 15. In addition, I can add units. So if I wanted this to be 2 meters, I could type in 2m. However, what's not available by default is using this with hotkey translation tools. For instance, I could say G for grab x5, and that would work. However, one thing I can't do is say G x2 plus 3. This actually moves it 23 meters because it ignores the plus. If in the preferences we enable default to advanced numeric input, all of a sudden these commands also become available when we do hotkey translations. So here I could say get x2 plus 3, and I would move 5. Or I could say get x 5 feet, and it would move 5 feet. In addition, the same thing would work for rotations. If I wanted to rotate it 360 degrees divided by 11, I could do that. So if you're a fan of using mathematical equations in input boxes, and you want to use them in your hotkey translations as well, this is the option for you. The seventh option I want to show you is under Key Map. It's the spacebar action. This may not be a new setting to you, because when you first install Blender, you get the option to set this. You can set your spacebar to either play, to bring up a tools menu, or to bring up the search menu. However, once you've chosen that, sometimes it can be difficult to find where to change it back. This is where you do that. My number 8 option is also under Key Map. It's Tab for Pie menu. When you're on an object and you hit Tab, you enter Edit Mode. And when you hit Tab again, you leave Edit Mode. Pressing Control Tab will bring up a pie menu, including Edit Mode, Object Mode, and your other available modes. The Tab for Pie menu switches these options. So now, Tab alone brings up the pie menu, and Control Tab toggles Edit Mode. I find this helpful, as I'm not always going into Edit Mode with my changes, and so I like to have that option. And of course, one nice option with pie menus, if you move your mouse in the direction of the option you want when you're pressing the activation key, it will automatically choose that option. So for instance, if I hit Tab and then automatically swipe to the right, I enter Edit Mode. If I hit Tab and automatically switch to the left, I go into Object Mode. So it gets rid of that awkward Control Tab hotkey to get to the pie menu. Number 9 is another key map option. This one is extra shading pie menu items. By default, when I hit Z, I get these 4 options: wireframe, solid, material preview, and rendered. However, if I enable the extra shading pie menu items, when I hit the Z key, I get a couple more. I get toggle overlays, which gets rid of all of the overlays on my screen. Also, at the bottom of the pie menu is toggle X-ray. And while these options are up here, toggle X-ray and show overlays, having them under a hotkey is very, very helpful. Finally, the last setting to not miss is under System. This one is the Cycles Render Device. By default, the Cycles Render Device is set to none. So this means even if you have a high-end GPU, Cycles isn't going to use it for its rendering. And if you go under the render settings, you'll see that your device, even though it might say GPU compute, won't use your GPU. So make sure that under System, you choose the correct option for your system. Depending on the capabilities of your graphics card, you can choose CUDA, OptiX, or OpenCL. In my case, since I'm running a GeForce RTX 2070 Super, I'm going to choose OptiX. I can also choose my CPU to assist in the rendering if I want to. In my case, while I'm recording videos, I tend to leave my processor off so that it can focus on recording, and let the GPU handle the graphics processing. I hope these 10 settings help you customize Blender a little better for yourself. And you should spend some time poking around in the settings. There's a lot of cool options in there. In fact, in an upcoming Back to Basics video, I'm going to be doing a rundown of all of the settings in the Preferences window. Thanks for taking time to watch the video. I hope you're finding them helpful. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet and you're finding it helpful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I hope these customizations make Blender easier to use and help you make something awesome. So until next time, this is Johnny, and have a great one.